Yes, we can see you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Um, so I was asked to come here to talk tonight. I have quite a bit of history in the North Country. I was born, well, not born here. I was born in Burlington, but that was mostly a fluke. I was raised in Sable Forks for the first 4 years, and then I lived on Brinkerhoff Street right here in town until I went to college. Um, I'm an attorney here in the North Country. I practice immigration law through Prisoners Legal Services, but I'm just going forward to our first slide here, which at the top you'll notice says, "Why Lauren?" So I just put that there as a reminder to myself to explain to you why I thought I could speak to you from a sort of on the ground perspective, if you will. I work part-time for Prisoners Legal Services as an immigration attorney. I provide free immigration legal services in the North Country to immigrants in need. But I also have a law practice, and I practice criminal defense law as well as family law. So I come across immigrants in our community through multiple avenues, I guess you would say. And sort of because I'm so ingrained in the legal system, I have the privilege of being able to have access to people who may need my help, which is a tremendous opportunity. I've worked in New York City as well, and I am happy to be here. I'm happy to be working in this community. And a lot of that has to do with the tremendous impact I am able to have, mostly through all of you, because in a place like Plattsburgh in the North Country, I feel that we have the community necessary to sort of bring the services to people who are in need. In larger areas, very often we end up in a situation where people don't have access to their individual services. They'll go through a lot of red tape. They'll go from agency to agency. Whereas here in Plattsburgh, it's much easier through the limited resources we have to connect people to what they need. So there's probably a longer intro than you were all prepared for. But some topics I'd like to cover tonight here on the PowerPoint slide are some issues that we're seeing in Plattsburgh. Some of these are new issues that are arising in the immigrant community in Plattsburgh. Specifically, I don't want to say post-COVID, amid COVID, but we are struggling with particularly some humanitarian issues here in the local area. I also want to update you about some new policies and patterns that you should be aware of. Some of these aren't new, but there's certainly a lot of misinformation out there, and I can't speak to any other region, but I sure know a lot about the at least legal needs of the community here. So just some patterns certainly that I'm noticing that I can point out for all of you. And then of course, I'd like to focus in at the end on any future trainings. I'm available to do these types of things for any groups. I can do follow-ups with this organization or whatever you would need, but I can tailor these trainings to the specific needs. Again, another indication of how, because of our small community, we can really tailor to the needs of the people that we serve. So I'm going to try to advance the slide. Wish me luck.
It's right here, but you know what? Before we do, we're going to try to, I know you can't see Lauren. There's just a phone call, and that's not a number that I recognize. So let me just,
She's on camera.
she is?
She's on your camera.
Okay, perfect.
If you guys can see me, that is wonderful.
Okay, great.
Okay, so I'm going to try.
You show up on Diana's little vignette. The PowerPoint is the main focus, but you're the little.
Okay, I'm wearing my shirt too.
The person on the phone, however, should mute themselves so they don't keep cutting in and covering you up. There's a person on a phone, and if we can mute that person.
We got technical on it. Diana is
Mute all. Okay. Okay.
okay. So, can I advance this?
Yep. Shall we cut that off?
Uh-oh. Okay, issues we are facing. So the specific one, the one that is specific to right now that we are noticing a tremendous change, has to do with the border closure. As many of you, I'm sure, are aware, there's only essential traffic permitted between Canada and the United States due to the Canadian restrictions on border crossing. That means that for now, whereas a lot of people were irregularly crossing to claim asylum in Canada, so these are people leaving the United States to seek asylum in Canada, are being turned around at the border because they are not allowed to enter due to COVID restrictions. What's happening is different depending on the individual, but unfortunately, some of these people are being detained. Our local jail, the Clayton County Jail, has a contract with immigration. Those people are being housed right here locally. To be clear, they are not being incarcerated due to any criminal conduct, unless, of course, some people consider criminal conduct being in the United States illegally. But there are no new charges. They're merely being noticed for attempting to leave the United States. What's happening with a lot of these people is they've spent essentially their last dime trying to get to Canada. So they end up in Plattsburgh with children, no resources, no food, no housing. And through networking specifically with Plattsburgh Cares, we try to connect them with services, whether it's finding them a homeless shelter we don't have local resources for this, but even in Albany, New York City, Detroit, getting Greyhound bus service, it was cut off up to the North Country, I believe, until recently, getting people to the Albany area so they can get a bus. But basically trying to connect people to their next point, merely as a way to survive. These people are often destitute, have no legal status in the United States, are traveling with children. And unfortunately, the irony of this situation is they're actually trying to leave the United States. You know, it begs the question when you have people incarcerated in this situation, whether it's a worthwhile use of resources, but nonetheless, these people would probably be leaving the United States but for the border closure, and they very often end up stranded here. That leads us right into our next little piggy bank bullet: limited resources and funding. This is a age-old problem in the North Country. We run up against it now. Plattsburgh Cares is predominantly privately funded. There's small private donations that keep them running, volunteers working around the clock. But again, even a small model like this would not be able to function in a bigger area because the need is just too great. Whereas here, I'd say, I have Diana sitting over here next to me, I'd say we've been able to serve almost every individual that has come across our door. And that's a tremendous, tremendous statement. But resources are limited. I make this pitch to all of you. If you have time, if you are willing, we need all the help we can get. So if you're willing to be on the ground, wonderful. If you're willing to pick up the phone and make a few calls, my email is at the end of this. You will obviously have Diana's email. Let us know. We want to hear your ideas, and we certainly want to reach out to you if you think you can offer us anything in terms of spreading our limited resources as far as they can go. And then finally, our another age-old problem, certainly not a new one in the North Country. We have language barriers with a lot of these individuals. I run into this a lot. I speak English and luckily Spanish better after coffee. But those are two languages. We have a lot of Haitian Creole. We have a lot of French speakers. And with those language barriers come cultural barriers. We have a lot of fear in the North Country. I saw a report recently about our demographics being very not diverse up here, which leads to fear, right? And we're going to touch on this later when it comes to misinformation. But I hope that through this PowerPoint, I'm going to, at least from my point of view, to be able to tell you from on the ground what I'm seeing in terms of our immigrant community and what I'm certainly not seeing. And hopefully give you some information to go out there into the community and share with others, because I think the best thing we can do is keep our community up to date and informed. So these are some bullets that I put on this slide, specifically talking about sort of the categories of immigrants that we tend to come into contact with in the North Country. Now, this is a hard thing to do. I'm not trying to group people together necessarily, but for purposes of this conversation, I thought it might be easier to put people into groups so in our brain we can kind of understand what we're dealing with. Who are the immigrants in our community? So I have three categories here. I have here to stay, temporarily here, and passing through. So we have a number of immigrants in our community, small business owners, legal permanent residents, naturalized citizens that have made their home here in Plattsburgh. Their children go to school here in Plattsburgh and in other local districts in the county. And for the most part, these families have decided to make Plattsburgh their home. They do what they can to contribute to their own communities, and they certainly consider the North Country to be their home. And that's sort of one grouping, if you will. We also have folks who are temporarily here, and that kind of goes into passing through, but temporarily here, I'm talking about people who are usually here for a period of several months. This is going to be a lot of our farm worker communities, folks on the apple orchards, folks here for harvest. And these folks are incredibly important to the North Country and incredibly important to our economy, particularly now. We have very small attendance, well, lesser attendance at the college because of COVID, huge source of revenue for our local community, as well as the Canadians visiting and shopping and spending money here, going to restaurants. A lot of those sources of revenue for our community have been shut off. But our temporary farm workers, they buy things, they send items home to their families. You'll see them shopping in town. A lot of this money is being pumped right back into the economy right here where we live. And that's an important thing to consider. We often hear people saying negative things about immigrants, particularly ones here on a temporary basis, that they don't contribute or they don't pay taxes or things along those lines. For the most part, that, at least for what I've seen in the North Country from my personal experience, is entirely untrue. A vast amount of the money that they're earning on the farms is being spent right here in our community. And then we have the folks passing through. And this is specifically the category of folks I'm talking about at the border. Maybe a week, maybe as long as we can afford to keep them in a hotel, a very, very temporary basis in extreme crisis, most of these people. So again, you know, obviously we'll come to this later, but is this a reason to be afraid? And the answer is absolutely not. And the reason that it's absolutely not is because we have people in this community that they can rely on. We have Plattsburgh Cares. We have community members willing to put people up for a night. We have access to bus tickets. We can provide people with access to JCEO to get their absolute basic needs met. And that's critical to their safety as well as other people's safety in the community. But for them, being this close to the border is an extreme consideration. We have a lot of enforcement up here near the border, whereas in New York City, even if you're undocumented, you may be able to find work under the table. Not so much the case here. We have a lot of community members who believe that they're doing the right thing by calling ICE on somebody or reporting somebody to immigration. They believe, and I believe that their intentions are pure, that they are protecting our community. However, those efforts could be much better spent helping somebody find their next destination, making sure that they have the food they need and the clothing they need to get to their next stop, as opposed to, I guess, invoking the authorities. So probably the most important bullet in this slide is who they are not, okay? And this is very important in terms of misinformation. We hear a lot of the criminal rhetoric that we have people in our communities who are coming to this country to commit crimes. Now, again, I'm happy to talk about my personal experience here on the ground. So I'm keeping this limited to our North Country region, but these are not people coming to the North Country who are seeking to commit crimes, particularly violent crime. I work in the criminal justice system. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I deal with a number of violent criminals from all walks of life. They are, in my experience, at least here, predominantly citizens. And I think even for those of us who pay attention to the news, we have what I call out-of-towners, people who may be coming from other parts of the state, but very often when we think of criminals, rapists, robbers, things like that, that are threats to our community, these are not the people that are the immigrants here in our community. Those tend to be much more committed by citizens. And this brings me right into my next slide. And probably the most important bullet on this one is the first one, and that's the interaction of the criminal justice system, the Clinton County Jail, and sort of the resulting impact with immigration bonds here. So as I mentioned before, we have a lot of immigrants in the Clinton County Jail. So you're saying, but what, Lauren, you just said that they're not criminals. Well, the reality is that we detain people for immigration purposes in the Clinton County Jail. So that means that somebody on an expired visa who's pulled over for a seatbelt ticket. That means somebody who hits a checkpoint on 87 and can't produce proof of citizenship. That means even United States citizens are being detained because for some reason or another, they didn't have the documents available to them and an assumption was made leading to their detention. Unfortunately, those of you who do know about the criminal justice system here, there has been a substantial amount of bail reform in New York State, meaning most petty offenses, New York courts can't even set bail on. Nominal bail, sometimes $500, $1,000. Immigration bonds, and bond, although that has a meaning in the bail context, it means bail for immigration purposes. So an immigration bond is exactly what you would have to post to get out of immigration detention. They are exorbitantly high. The lowest we've been seeing is $10,000. Most recently, I saw one for 50. These are substantially higher than bail you would see on violent criminals being set for local community members if they were to have committed a crime. But these people, again, importantly, have never been accused or arrested for an offense. And importantly, the way we know that is for those undocumented folks, if they are picked up for committing a criminal offense, deportation proceedings will start almost immediately. So had they been arrested in the United States, it's very likely that they would have experienced some form of immigration enforcement. The fact that they are still here is very often an indication that they haven't been charged with a criminal offense or accused of anything, because that would have brought to light that they were undocumented, just like a seatbelt ticket would. So it's important to keep in mind, particularly when people are talking about folks in the county jail. I do see immigrants charged with crimes in this community. Very often it's going to be something like stealing food, plate, forks from Walmart. Okay, so Walmart might be the victim of that one. It's going to be someone thinking that they had money to pay a cab fare, but unable to. It might even be the perpetrator of a crime of domestic violence calling the police on their abused significant other to exercise another level of control. And this is another important area, is the victims of domestic violence and access to the courts. We do have in our community a number of immigrants, and I would categorize these people as the here to stayers that have come here. Typically, I've encountered this in what we refer to as mail order bride context. I know it can go both ways. My experience, it has been women coming from abroad to marry and hopefully acquire citizenship. Unfortunately, when they arrive, the case may not be as it was painted to them when they were told to come here. And even acquiring status in this country becomes another means of control for the citizen, spouse, significant other. This is a very important category of people because they are incredibly vulnerable, but they also have a very powerful position in the immigration courts and means to a green card and even citizenship if they are a victim of domestic violence at the hands of an American citizen, spouse, or a legal permanent resident spouse. We take that very seriously here, and all kinds of protections can be put in place for anonymity. Unfortunately, a lot of these people are very, very afraid to come forward for all of the reasons that I mentioned before: language, culture, and very often their only person that they know in our community may be their abuser. And this brings me to the next bullet point, which is access to the courts. Again, our community can only be safe if everybody has access to the court system for protection, and it's simply not a reality for immigrants. There is enforcement in the court system, particularly in the family court system when parents, let's say, get into it. They may use immigration as a tool to make another parent afraid. They may use it in a child support context. They may use it as a threat. And immigrants very often are afraid, and as much as it pains me to say it, should be afraid to come to court in some circumstances in the North Country. And the reason I bring this up, we can't wave a magic wand and solve all these problems tonight, but it's very important that they speak with an attorney. There's a hotline on the front page of the PowerPoint that can provide access. Diana also has my contact information. My email is at the end of this. If you have anyone, even just to say, it might be best for you to talk to a lawyer, ask no questions, provide the contact, that can be a person's literal saving grace. So I ask you all to keep that in mind. Now, since we don't have enough on our plates with everything I've just thrown at you, I decided to put this in here. What about our neighboring counties? What about St. Lawrence? What about Essex? What about Franklin? As much as people may be cut off here in Plattsburgh, we're the metropolis. Take them out to St. Lawrence or some other places, they may not even be able to find a courthouse. So that is really important looking forward for, I hope, your role in all of this. And again, because of our sparse population and big area coverage, our big ticket item is the networking. It's important for me to have access to folks in St. Lawrence who may even be more fearful. Folks up in Champlain who are spitting distance from ICE and Customs and Border Patrol authorities who are paroling the streets on the daily. I want to make sure that we're reaching folks in those counties. And the only way I can do that is through reaching out to all of you. So Again, if there's another community group that you would like me to speak to, I can tailor a PowerPoint specific to them. But St. Lawrence County, I believe, is the largest county east of the Mississippi. So that is huge. And although sparsely populated, it makes it even harder for the folks who are living in those areas to get access to legal services, access to the courts, and access to protection very often that they need. And finally, I have no segue here. I was doing well on my segues, but I'm going to jump right into health concerns. I threw this in here because this is just another area of misinformation I'm hearing, obviously, with all the transients that I've brought up, people coming from Florida to try to get through Roxham Road. We got people all around. Obviously, that brings up health concerns, and particularly in these times. So for your information and for anyone else who may be curious, this is right from the ONA website. The link is on the PowerPoint slide. Immigrants should not be afraid to access health services, particularly related to this pandemic. There's a note there about the public charge test. I could do a whole PowerPoint just on that. I provide this to you in hopes that if you hear this type of thing around the community, that people are bringing the pandemic here, that because we have Roxham, we have all of these people who can't even go to the doctor. That's entirely untrue. They do have access to medical services. They should not fear immigration consequences. And they should be encouraged to seek testing or COVID-related treatment should it arise. Now, again, this is a very tricky area, and I would recommend that you not advise anyone directly with respect to this. This is more just if you're hearing things around the community, I want you to have access to this link so you can dispel any misinformation. As far as any undocumented folks, people out of status, expired status, even green card holders, they should speak to an attorney even before accessing COVID-related medical treatment. Obviously, I would do this in a phone consult, but where we run into trouble here is when it triggers other underlying, this is not my area, pre-existing conditions, life support, things like that can go into a non-COVID related health area where they wouldn't necessarily be covered. But again, as far as people coming here, not having access to medical care, not having access to treatment, we live in a fabulous state that has really looked out for all New Yorkers' well-beings. And I think this is a tremendous indication of that. Again, a little bit more information here also available at the link. Just in terms of people being scammed, we're seeing a lot of people getting phone calls about Social Security being suspended, issues with price gouging. This is, again, New York State looking out for New Yorkers here. But those protections, consumer protections, all of these things should be available to immigrants. In the reality, they probably aren't because they just don't have access to the resources. But that's why I'm providing them to you. And I think Diana is going to be able to make this PowerPoint available by email to all of you. So you have the link available should you need it, or we can post it, I'm sure. She's nodding off screen to my left. So I put this slide in here specifically because I know we're speaking to folks who want to get out the vote here. Again, I hope to be able to, when we start doing naturalization and citizenship ceremonies, again, there are small ones happening. I want to make sure all of our new naturalized community members are fully aware of how to register and participate in our political process. Again, I want to be very careful here not to group people as a whole, but in terms of political involvement, I'm speaking not about a client here, but probably a community member we all know well. The owners of the Himalayan restaurant Tenzin, is that how he pronounces his name? Prime example that we can all learn from. Somebody who has decided to make this community our home, is incredibly invested in the political process and even ran for mayor. And again, not to group people together here, but we tend to see that among the immigrant community. And I think that comes from a pride in being a new American, a desire to participate in that process. And I believe that registering for our community members is even more important in the North Country area because of our tiny little local elections. Our immigrant community tends to keep themselves informed, tend to ask questions, tend to investigate issues that our local area is facing. And with all of that, we can only tell them, go forth and vote, right? And finally, of course, dangers of misinformation. I hope that I was able to give you a little bit here. I could probably speak for an hour on any of these topics, but my fear is, and my desire to speak to all of you really comes from, again, not a political motivation, but a community-based motivation. I love this place. I live here. It's my home. It's been my home my whole life. And I do honestly believe that we're only as strong as our most vulnerable members. So if we can remember that and recognize that some of the people in our community are coming here out of desperation and not out of a need or a desire to take anything away from us. Hopefully, if they do have an opportunity to naturalize or get a green card someday, they'll come back to us as their home as well. I think I have one more slide. For those of you who want to get involved, again, I could spend a year on this topic. Please, please, please help us build our network. Plattsburgh Cares can use all the help we can get in terms of dropping off a food package for somebody, booking a Greyhound ticket online, making a phone call to a homeless shelter to see if they're accepting women and children and if they have availability. Again, our strength here is that we can tailor based on our community need. So we do this on a case-by-case basis. We try to give every individual the attention that they need and the services to the best of our ability, tailored to that need. Reach out to Plattsburgh Cares if you'd like to get involved. We have plenty of room, plenty of work. And finally, really, again, I've said this probably starting to sound like a broken record here. The reason that this can work is because of our small community. While we have an influx of people now in need, we have stretched, we have worked, we have yelled, but we have been able to meet those needs. And again, that's to the help of the great volunteers that are involved in this already, but it's also me reaching out to all of you. If you have time, if you have interest, we have work for you to do. So there's the promised email. I can provide a phone number too as well. I'm going to duck off because I don't know how to do any other type of.
Well, you're going to be right
Should I
back.
elevator down?
No, you can be right here again.
Oh, I'm going to be.
Yep. Let's see. How can I?
We're going to try to figure out how to do questions. That's what we're working on at the moment.
So we want gallery view.
Gallery view.
Yay. and
One way to do that is to have people go to their chat button and type in a chat question, which will go out to everybody, and you can see it at the bottom of, or off to the side of your screen, and work your way down through those.
Okay, or just unmute yourself. Does anyone have an immediate question? You can raise your hand. Yes, Betsy Brooks. So Betsy, please unmute yourself. Can you unmute yourself?
Oh, there you go. Thank you
Maybe
so
we
much.
can unmute her.
That was very
Okay, good.
interesting. You can hear me now?
Yes.
So I had a question about the immigration bonds, and I wondered if that was a policy, a local policy, or if it's kind of a statewide policy to set those bonds high, or what influences that?
So I could do another whole one on this. So immigration bonds, unlike bail, can be set by the official. So it can be set by the enforcement officer that the person first encounters. Now, this can be helpful because sometimes, for some reason, they'll be sympathetic and they'll set a lower, maybe 10, that we say lower, 10,000 being the low range. But it can also be challenging because maybe somebody sees a tattoo and thinks it's gang related. Maybe it is, maybe it's not, but that may be the basis. There's no lawyer involved. There's no arguments being heard by a judge. There's a piece of paper that's a bond order being signed. Now, one thing I didn't bring up, and just another testament to the power of community organizations, one organization we've been working with is the Brooklyn Bail Fund. They're based out of New York City. Again, privately funded through a number of well-funded. And they're posting immigration bonds for people. So they're actually, they just posted a $23,000 immigration bond for one of my clients last week, allowing him to leave Batavia. They have posted, I'd say 7 or 8 $10,000 bonds for folks in the Clinton County Jail. Now, this is a very, very tremendous thing because folks in the Clinton County Jail, many of them are trying to get to Canada. So theoretically, they're going to post the bond. If the border reopens, these folks may go. That $10,000 may very well be lost. But the point of this organization, while they do try to get people to show up to court, they recognize that somebody fearing for their life, $10,000 may be a small price to pay. So again, we've had tremendous success with them. We've been able to help their organization as well, because when folks are released from the Clinton County Jail, Plattsburgh Cares comes right up to the jail. We got food, we got translators, we got bus tickets, we got change of address forms, we got stamped envelopes, we got a driver. You know, they get a caravan when they come out here. So it's concerning with the bonds, but it's certainly, that's not a new thing. That's something that's been the case. These high immigration bonds have been the case for a long time. Feel free to raise hands.
Oh, other questions? Tom Metz, go ahead, Tom.
Lauren, you mentioned that the temporary people moving through several months, including apple pickers, is Jamaica and the other Caribbean nations allowed in?
So they're having a lot of issues with that. So they're definitely operating with fewer people. Some folks are here. We're trying, that's another community we have had a little bit of an issue breaking into. We're actually hoping that through COVID we'll have more access, because farm worker employers who want more employees here may actually want to speak to an immigration lawyer to figure out how we can fill some of the positions, so to speak. But we do have some significantly fewer.
Some other questions? Yes, Joellen, unmute yourself, please. I'm going to, there you go.
So just to follow up on that, Diana, from what Tom asked, what is the barrier? Why are there fewer what's the barrier being thrown up that suddenly they can't get the workers, the number that they normally would?
It's the corona. It's the Rona. So between travel restrictions going back to home countries, travel restrictions here, I mean, even if anyone has tried to travel, my mom tried to leave to go to the Caribbean, getting a ticket, getting the testing in order. I mean, now, luckily, I think we're doing pretty well in Plattsburgh with testing. The jail is testing. Where we have access to tests. So for folks going back who may need to have a 2 tests in a 24-hour, this is not my area, but something like 2 tests 24 hours apart, they're going to be able to get those. But people worry even if they come here, if they're going to be able to come back. And in terms of processing with immigration, everything is messed up and delayed right now. We furloughed all kinds of people who are processing these applications. So everything is slowed down, if not entirely halted. And then obviously flight issues, God only knows.
Okay, any other questions? And if you're not on video and don't raise your hand, just unmute yourself and speak up.
I'm looking at the chat, I think, too, if anyone wants to type in there.
Okay.
I have one I just remembered.
Sure.
You said you speak Spanish and English. Do you have people who help you with French and other languages?
We need all the French we can get because right now it's predominantly Haitian Creole. A lot of folks, depending on where they went through, may speak Spanish if they spent time in South America, but a lot of them do speak French. So we can communicate in French. I'm working on my French, not so good, but yes, if you have people with language abilities, particularly French and Haitian Creole, imperative right now. Even if we can do a phone call with you to just get some basic messaging across.
I don't personally, but.
Anyone you know.
Okay, I'll think about that.
All right. Okay, so any other last questions? 3, 2,
Did you all see my
1.
shirt?
Yay! Yay! So we want to thank Lauren for being our special guest tonight, and we're going to allow her to leave, and Helen's going to just start the meeting, and we'll let Lauren head out the door here. Yes, there's clapping, there's thumbs up. Yay! Yay! She says thank you. All right. Okay, so I'm just going to mute for a moment. And Helen, you've got the stage. And just to start the meeting, I'll be right back with you.
Okay, what we're doing is trying to, we always had a lot of socializing at our meetings and saying hi, who we were. And I think it's an opportunity for us to do that here. We have a new member. Did we lose her? Is she? I don't know if she left. Some people are leaving. It is getting a little late, so it's okay if you want to leave. But if anyone, Joan, do you want to introduce yourself to all of us and, start maybe with you? You have to unmute yourself, though. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, I got to find the right button.
Good. Okay.
I am somewhat technologically inept.